Oh, come on, you can't be that busy. Just a little help here. I swear it's important to the war effort, Steve pleaded with his sister Carla. They were in a Legion camp not far from the Nomium border. Carla was part of a special legal detachment that had been deployed with them. Her legal specialty was in great demand when there was a war on, and she was doing her patriotic duty. I can't just torture anyone, she stressed. There's a list! She waved at the scroll before her. And I'm already way behind thanks to this influx of gnomish terrorists who have been trying to help the coalition. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to crucify a gnome? She asked him with a huff. But they're so small. Wouldn't being lighter make it easier to crucify them? He asked as he rubbed his chin, now seriously pondering the question. It's not like an ethical difficulty, is it? I mean, they're child-sized, but definitely not children. He continued, but his sister shook her head and waved him off. No, it's their size that makes it difficult. My guys keep messing up with the nails. Their wrists are so small the nail splits the wrist and they bleed out in just a few minutes. It defeats the whole purpose. Then it's like, do we bother putting them up anyway? Or just toss the body away and try to make the next one work? The necessary precision is seriously messing with our efficiency, and my boss is breathing down my neck as I try to sort it out, she explained, as she ran a hand through her hair in frustration. I thought that they had professionals for this sort of thing. Don't you do it fairly often? Steve asked next. Normally, but right now most Legionnaires are needed at the front. Since we're dealing with irregular forces, most of what they gave me are Marines. They're good at killing and all that, but it's been hell trying to get things done around here. Did you know some of them keep eating the wax we use for official seals? She huffed at that, and Steve took a few seconds to process it as he frowned and finally asked, But why? As he looked at his sister in confusion. At first, it was because it made them just sick enough that the Centurions wouldn't make them do fatigue work or PT, but then they caught on and ordered them to do their work anyway. But it did actually make them sick, so there were Marines puking wax all over the place for a week until we locked it all up. Carla just shrugged, then since she couldn't really explain it more than that. Steve was quiet for a moment as he thought over his sister's problem. What if you just tie them to the cross? The Marines? She frowned in confusion before realizing what Steve meant. Oh, the gnomes? Just let them dehydrate up there? That'll take way too long, and they'd be bitching the entire time. If I cut out their tongues, they're far too likely to bleed to death, and otherwise I'm not going to listen to a bunch of annoying gnomes on sticks for days on end before they finally die. She crossed her arms and shook her head. No, no, no. He waved his hands then. You tie them extra secure to the cross for support, but then use smaller nails. Get an orc with some precision and a smaller, sharper nail and just drive it in through the wrist in one go. Bam! Then they are nailed to the cross, but since they're also tied to it, so the nail doesn't need to take nearly as much of their weight. Carla nodded slowly and then wagged a finger at him. Smart! I like it. That'll also save on time. I can get to work on my backlog much faster if it works right, and I think it will now that you've put the idea in my head. She smiled then, and smacked her brother's arm with a grin. I guess you're not so useless after all. Ha ha, he muttered with a roll of his eyes. His siblings had been joking about that ever since he went off to Arbitus to learn magic. So, can you help me out with my problem? Please? He asked once more. I mean, you're great at this sort of thing. I've killed people plenty, but this is totally different. He had her follow him into the other side of the tent, where a Kasurian knight was tied to a table. That's because so many amateurs get it wrong, to say nothing of people who've never seen a real professional work, Carla was saying as she grabbed an apple from a tray as she started to walk around the knight and look him over. Too many people think I do this because I get off on it or some shit like that. But no, it's just a job I'm good at. She admitted before taking a bite out of the apple, chewing it as she thought over her task. Think it could be done? Steve asked. He is a knight. Much as I hate the Kasurians, even I admit their knights can be tough. Carla just snorted and finished chewing, swallowing before waving at the knight with her apple in hand. Being tough doesn't really matter. It's just about getting information, so it's about knowing how to get it from him. Technically, he could be handed off as a prisoner, so he doesn't even have to die by the end of it, which makes things easy. Then it's just about the proper application of discomfort. She took another bite of the apple and slowly chewed it as she kept looking down at the knight tied to the table. While she did that, the knight struggled in his bindings and tried to say something through his gag. Carla gave Steve a look then before he shrugged. I don't know. He's probably spouting off about his sacred task as a knight of the crown or some shit. Who gives a fuck? Carla replied once she swallowed more of the apple. Then she waved at his hands. I'd probably start with the fingers. He's a soldier, so I wouldn't break them, too damaging to his career. No. I'd use this new trick I've learned. You take these special formed little wedges of wood, little bigger than a splinter. Then you slowly tap them into place, jamming them up under the fingernails, which is painful enough. But then you keep washing them, or just dripping water on them. So they slowly expand, bit by bit. Of course, the wood will get soggy, but that's fine, since the pain will be from how far under his nails I've jammed them, and not because the wood is sharp. Then the wedges slowly expand and force his nails up and off, but slowly like I said, which really helps draw out the pain. By now, the knight was glancing from Carla to Steve and didn't try to say anything else through his gag. Carla scratched her eyebrow with one hand then, as she thought over her task. Then I'd probably say get a noose around his throat. Test it out until I get it to the point where it restricts his breathing just enough that he's almost passing out, but not quite. See, when you get like that, your senses get way more intense, especially pain. Not sure why. She shrugged. That'll help increase the pain level because then I'd get out my favorites. She glanced around for a moment and smiled as she walked over to her workbench, setting down the apple and picking up a needle that could only be seen thanks to the glimmer it made in the light. See, for men, I have this special technique where I slowly work this up his urethra. That's your dick hole, Steve explained to the knight. Yes, thank you. Carla rolled her eyes. Always so crass. She muttered once more. Anyway, I slowly work it up there gently as I can, usually while icing his balls to keep it small. Maybe I'll work one or two more in there for good measure. Then I start stroking it to give him a hard-on, and as it gets hard, the needles inside just start tearing through the flesh. Even as she continued her detailed description of what would happen, the knight began to buck and twist in his bindings and trying to speak rapidly through his tag as he looked at Steve. Oh, what the hell does he want? I haven't even gotten to the bit with the fire ants, Carla complained before Steve pulled the knight's gag away. The secret code is purity. Then you need to touch the third silver charm and the second gold circle. There are 4 Knights Templar inside. What you're looking for is in the last vault on the left, and the key to that is under the loose rock at the top of the sun pillar. That's everything you wanted to know, right? His eyes wild and desperate as he spoke. Ooh, come on. I haven't even gotten started. That's no fun. Can't I just do the fingernail thing at least? Carla said with a wave as Steve just held up his hand to ward her off. Magic security? Steve asked. Elven runestones set up by Quarry herself. There's a double layer of them. One's obvious, the other is worked into the wall just below the ceiling where it's easy to miss. One of the knights is allergic to strawberries, one is afraid of snakes, and the other two, I don't know. They've got families you can kidnap if you want. I'm not sure where they live exactly, but I can find out for you. Steve shook his head then and pulled the gag back into place. I don't kidnap kids, but that's all I need to know. Come on, Carla, you can hand him over to the army for military questioning. He waved for his sister to follow him. Oh, well, maybe I'll get a chance to torture him over later. I do hate not getting practice, she said as she picked up her apple and followed Steve out of the tent. Once they were outside, both began to laugh, and Steve shook his head slowly. You really are good, Steve said as she grinned and puffed up her chest a bit. The best, she agreed. Does that wood splinter thing really work? He asked, and she laughed before shaking her head. Fuck no. The wood would just get all soggy and fall apart. She snorted. And the needles? He asked. Sewing needles. I use them to stitch up my clothes when I get a rip. She patted the side of her tunic to show him one such patch. I've never had to use the damn things for anything else. The thread is good enough, especially from a woman. Guys like that are terrified of having anything happen to their dick. It's worse if it's being done by a beautiful woman. Carla mentioned as she ran a hand through her hair and struck a pose which made Steve laugh. Right. Well, that's all I need. So how are things going with the nomium? Think they'll maintain their neutrality? He asked, even as he watched one of Carla's teams very carefully trying to crucify a squirming gnome to a cross. He better understood now what it was taking so long since they had such a small target to work with. Their nobility hates it, but their merchant council is demanding it. They haven't got a chance at breaking out of our enclosure, and if they try, then we'll invade and occupy. The trouble are the ones trying to slip out and join the coalition, like I said. They're useless in a real fight, but those little shits sure can make explosives and hide in places we can't fit, she admitted. Once we start decorating more of the border with crosses, they'll fall in line. The wargs sniff them out anyway, so there's no land route they can safely take. It's just about making that clear so they stop trying. Right. Well, you get back to work. Thanks again. Steve turned to give his sister a tight hug, then before pulling back. Give Jane my love. She really is better than a hick farmer like you deserve, you know. Oh, fucking blow me, Carla muttered as Steve laughed and turned to join up with the other members of Doom as they watched as Gnome nailed to a cross get set up right. Just as the cross was put into place, though, the gnome started screaming out. Wait! I have information on Flabbergnabber. I can tell you where he is. Carla approached the Marines around the base of the cross then. Let's hear it then. She crossed her arms. Bring me down! Bring me down! The gnome was crying out. Give me something first so I know it's real, Carla insisted. Sassy Flap Gulch! That's where you last saw him! I can lead you to him! After a moment, Carla nodded to the Marines. Bring him down, she instructed. Oh, come on! The nearest Marine gasped out. We just got him up, he complained and waved up at the gnome. Listen, Flabbergnabber is an Almarin-killing son of a bitch and the most wanted terrorist out there right now. We lost him somewhere between Sassy Flap Gulch and Gumdrop Glade, and we will not be sending a cohort into that nightmare of a place again without intel. Bring him down, she growled out, and the Marines grumbled yet started to go through the process of lifting the cross to bring it back down. Steve! Fenrina looked over at Steve after the interaction before them. Are you sure we're doing the right thing? Crucifying people seems mean. What? You've seen what they do in other places, right? The Kasurians behead people and then stick that head on a stick, or lock them in cages from their castle towers to starve to death, or tie their limbs to 4 horses pulling in different directions. Crucifixion is just another form of capital punishment, and it has been proven to cut down on acts of crime and terror. It's fine, he insisted. You know, wars make everything seem more complicated. Ethically. Fenrina went on as Steve groaned. Ethics! Damn it, Sherry! What did I tell you about teaching her that sort of stuff while we're in the middle of something big? He glared at the half-demon, but she just shrugged. You know demons are firm believers of the freedom of information. She asked. I explained. Also, is Gumdrop Glade really that bad? Sherry turned to look at Steve. Oh, it's a fucking nightmarish shithole, Steve said with a nod. But enough about that. It's time. Spellslinger defiles a church. You're sure about this, Steve? Sherry asked as they approached the small church that housed far more than it let on with the simple stone construction. Positive. I can smell the stench that Arturian left behind, Steve muttered as he watched the door to the church to see if anyone had seen them approach. No, I don't mean if you're sure this is the place. I can hear that annoying singing that elven wardstones give off. I mean, are you sure this is the course of action you want to take? You're not particularly liked around here, I know, but dethroning a king, even if you're right, they're going to be pissed at you. Sure, it's wise to make yourself an enemy of an entire nation? She asked. Oh, I'm positive about that, too. You saw the crystal ball. He had his older brother killed. Doesn't matter if he's the king now or not. Even the Kasurian nobles can't let that slide. I mean, if he was super popular, maybe. But he's not. We can't risk him trying to claim authority over the Insul Multi. Rule should revert to his sister-in-law since she's the next oldest of royal blood and she's well respected. She seems to be far more moderate as well, So there's a chance we can also convince her to back out of the coalition, he insisted. Then he held up at the low stone wall surrounding the church grounds. You know, Larry could get in trouble for defiling the holy grounds of another god, Larry mentioned as he began to walk along the side of the wall to find the nearest ward stone to defuse. You'll be fine. Gods fuck with each other all the time. Besides, Naranya and Canicist are both asshole gods of fate. So if we attack a church dedicated to either one of them, then that was fated to happen, right? If they try to claim it wasn't supposed to happen, then that means they didn't see it coming, which then makes them look weak. We win no matter what, Steve assured the dwarf. Technically, Naranya is a goddess of destiny and the wind and other things, Sherry mentioned, which made Steve groan and roll his eyes. Ooh, so different. If I wasn't sure it would cause undue attention, I'd be cursing them both out very hard right now, Steve muttered. Well, the Kasurians do believe it's their destiny to create an empire so large the sun never sets upon it, Sherry added. Puffed! These shitty little islands? Not likely. Though I could see why they'd want to do that. This place is so fucking dreary and gray, it would drive me to bouts of homicidal conquest of other lands that aren't so shitty. And this is supposedly the not-so-bad part of the islands. Some of the places further north, they're even worse. And they claim they're speaking common, but it's like they took various words and just gave them totally different meanings, or even cut words in half, so you're not sure what you're hearing. It's madness, I tell you. Steve ranted. Why not just create a whole new language? I don't get it. So you're sure this isn't a trap? Fenrina asked, while the other three spread out around the wall to disable the magic defenses their rivals had set up around the church. Considering all the trouble I went through to find it? Probably not. But also possibly. You know the rule 1 of adventuring, Fenrina, Steve mentioned. Literally everything might be a trap, or a mimic, or poison, so always be prepared, she recited. Atta girl. Steve grinned as he knocked over a disenchanted ward stone. Besides, the various members of Crap were spotted elsewhere today, and that means even if this is a trap, they won't be here to try and stop us, so we should be fine. Why's that? Couldn't Quarry have set up some sort of magic alarm, and then she'd know we were here so she could teleport them all here to fight us? Fenrina asked. She's an adept at the wrong schools of magic to use teleport. And even if she could, she wouldn't. No adventurers uses teleport as often as I do, considering the risks involved, Steve mentioned casually, even as Fenrina frowned. Risks? She asked as the others finished dismantling the first line of stones. They walked through the gate, then onto the main church grounds as they got ready to inspect and dismantle the next set of stones built into the church just below the roofline. Yeah, standard teleport stuff, ending up infused into an obstacle at your destination, or being scattered across the destination area by accident, Steve mentioned casually, which made Fenrina blink. What? This whole time that could have happened to us? She asked. Well, but it's like a super rare chance, and even more rare now that I'm good at it. It's like what are the chances of being hit by lightning, you know? Steve mentioned as he waved his hand dismissively. But, Steve, you get hit by lightning like all the time, Fenrina pointed out. Spells don't count, he huffed.